dans la caille. Quelquefois à mon corps défendant, j'ai au moins pas ni réponse pour tao. Oh non, non. Les manques à songer, on peut pas attendre. Tout corps en moins qu'à mon désiré. Les manques à ouais, c'est au moins qu'attendre. Tout coûter ça.
Muntaka mwamiti wandovi moyema Isodi mule matin wandovi mama Dikana voti loten wando bambe moyema Yelelo leino dango ndego balati ndego Pinleto ya inde
Mama. Les manques à songer, on peut pas attendre. Tout corps en moins qu'à mon désiré. Les manques à ouais, c'est au moins qu'attendre.
Alrighty, Lauren, you're on.
Fabulous. Thank you, Fatma, for that lovely music to bring us in. Hello, hello, and welcome, everybody. My name is Lauren Gilbo. I'm the head of growth at ThinkHuman, and it's my pleasure to be kicking off this webinar today. A big welcome to our ThinkHuman community that have been with us for a long time, and a special welcome to those that are just joining us and just getting to know us. We're so thrilled you're here and excited to get kicked off today. Today, I'm calling from a tiny town in upstate New York called Copake Falls. I'd love to know where you're all dialing in from. So hop in the chat, let us know where you're dialing in from, and we're so excited to see where everybody is. Oh, Boston, Brooklyn, New York, Portland. Oh my God, Austin, my hometown. Very excited. So everyone, we're going to get started in just a few minutes. And today we're going to be talking about returning to the office in this new world of work that we're entering into. So as you're getting settled, we'd love to get the conversation started. And I'm loving the engagement we have right now in the chat. One of the ways that we'll be interacting is directly through that chat channel. A chat feature in Zoom. If anybody doesn't know where it is, just hover over your Zoom window and you'll find it in the lower right-hand corner. We'll be asking you for feedback and questions. Feel free to ask the panelists and add questions into the chat, and we'll be monitoring that throughout the session to make sure this is interactive, and we're also answering the questions that you really have that are burning inside of you that our amazing panelist and facilitator can help bring light to. So to kick things off, we'd love to hear why you showed up here today. So anyone that's willing to hop in and share, jump in the chat and let us know, how are you experiencing the transition of returning to the office as a human? And what brought you here today to the webinar? What's really interesting? What's going on in your world that we can talk about today? So before we dive into the discussion, I'm seeing some great stuff coming in. Guidance on how to make a policy to return to the office, understand the hybrid environment. Oh, we're gonna get into some juicy stuff. So before we dive into our discussion today, I want to quickly introduce our partner and ThinkHuman. So our partner, Culture Amp, which I am a proud ex-Culture Amp employee. We call ourselves campers, and it's always fabulous to partner with Culture Amp at ThinkHuman. Culture Amp, for those who don't know, is a people and culture platform that makes it easy to collect, understand, and take action on feedback throughout the entire employee lifecycle. Culture Amp revolutionizes how over 25 million employees across 4,000 companies create a better world of work. As the global platform leader for employee experience, Culture Amp empowers companies of all sizes and industries to transform employee engagement, develop high-performing teams, and retain talent via cutting-edge research, powerful technology, and the world's largest employee data set in the world. ThinkHuman unleashes the soul in business by equipping business leaders with the skills they need to lead effectively, compassionately, and most importantly, inclusively. We do this work through cohort-based leadership journeys focused on increasing emotional intelligence and creating space for true mindset shifts and long-lasting behavioral change. We personally believe as a company that the work we do in L&D is most impactful when aligned and combined with your DEI initiatives. And we're so excited to speak with you about the way we see the future of L&D and having that intertwined with DEI work and DEI initiatives. So a poll is about to pop up and give you the chance to raise your hand to connect with one or both of us. I know I would personally love to connect with anyone who wants to dig into this work and explore new possible futures for the office as we return to normal. So select the partner you want to connect with deeper, and someone from our teams will go ahead and reach out and create some space for us to connect, get to know each other, and see if there's any paths forward for doing work together. So I'm going to give you a few minutes or a few seconds here to go ahead and answer the poll. Pause. And while everyone's doing that, excuse me, I'm going to go ahead and go ahead and introduce a very special treat for this webinar, which we have coming up right after me. I'll be handing you off to violinist Sane On, who's going to kick us off with some music. Sane is a graduate of the Columbia and Juilliard Exchange Program in 2020. She majored in economics and studied violin with Catherine Cho at the Juilliard School of Music, and is currently working full-time as an analyst at Fred Alger Management in NYC, covering consumer technology companies. The name of the piece she'll be playing is Prelude from the Bach Partita number 3 in E major. And we sincerely hope that you feel grounded and open for today's discussion, and that this music will allow for a lovely entrance into a beautiful conversation today. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sane. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited for the conversation that happens within this webinar today. Sane?
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me to play here. I will just start off and play the piece now.
absolutely beautiful, amazing. You are getting applause, amazing, bravo, remote Carnegie Hall. People are saying it's so, calming, and it's a privilege just to be here with you today. Thank you so much, Shane. That was absolutely beautiful.
Well, thank you so much, Keia. I had so much fun. And yeah, I can't wait to hear all the discussion today. And I'm super honored to be invited here and hope to see you soon.
Yes, the same here. Thank you. Welcome. It feels so good to see that everyone enjoyed this beautiful piece that Shane has just blessed us with. It was truly a blessing to me. I closed my eyes and I allowed the music to move through my body, and it was extremely calming. And yes, it's definitely a gift. So thank you, and we hope that you enjoy. So welcome everyone across the world, wherever you are. Good evening, afternoon, good morning. We are so happy to be here with you today. I am Hakimia Jackson, Global Executive Coach, CEO of Divinely Powered, DEI Board Advisor, and I will be your ThinkHuman moderator today. I'm so excited to be here to share this panel with you today. And I just want to start off to say, hey, the revolution has begun, okay? The pandemic catalyzed us to think about work in a different way. For us to think about space and flexibility and how they can work together. We had to really be creative and create this new definition of how we work, remotely. We're now forced to think about the 5-day, 9-to-5 in-office work week that has underpinned work life for nearly a century in a new way. We have to be flexible. Flexibility had been seeping into the workplace, but now it's flooding our corporate walls in our corporate world as companies discover that remote work didn't slash productivity and employee value at all. Actually, it enhanced it. SHRM did some research and they found that 70% of employees, specifically in America, would prefer to work remotely on a full-time or part-time basis if given the option. And 35% would accept a salary reduction in return for the flexibility. Corporate executives, anxiety extends to have, how did this hybrid work really work and affect the culture, especially when it comes to D&I. That's top of mind now. Some people even fear that the approach will create a two-tiered system of employees and that leadership, even if only subconsciously, may favor those that are in front of them. I am sure all of these things have crossed your mind today. And I'm so grateful to be here with you today to explore the return to office in the new world of work. Even better, I'm honored to be accompanied by these valuable thought leaders and leading organizations in their industry to address the topic and provide some viable solutions for you and your company. So please help me welcome Asia Smith, facilitator and community catalyst, executive coach herself from ThinkHuman. Welcome, Asia. We are so happy to have you. Gina Romano, Vice President of Human Resources from Centerfield Media. Allison Tom, Vice President of People at Karoo. Anthony Coe, Senior People Scientist from Culture Amp. Welcome you all. And I want to start the conversation with this and present it to you all here on the panel. How are you experiencing the transition of returning to work at a human level?
That's a big question to start with. And I have to say, I still have chills from Shane. And yes. I was just picturing this, like, she was walking me through the pandemic with the music, and I could see the highs and the lows. And it was just very energizing and incredible way to start. Going back to your question, this transition after 18 months of struggle and pain and confusion and tough times has been really interesting. I think my company in particular, we are starting to bring people back in August, 1 day a week between Tuesdays and Thursdays. And we've done surveys as well. So SHRM's survey was similar to ours, except our employees said 90% of them said, I think I can stay from home. We've been productive. The company's been great. There's no need to rush back. And so while we understand that, we're going to start to slowly transition just 1 day, kind of pull them in, make sure there's lots of perks, lots of really great incentives for them so they feel good, nurtured, loved, supported, and hopefully that'll be an easy transition back.
I do want to piggyback off of what Gina just shared right there. And for me, as I'm experiencing the transition to return to work at a human level, I think the biggest thing for me is mental health. The last 18 months or so have really shifted the way I think about work, the way I think about how I want to position myself in my life regarding my career and my personal life. And I think that mental health is a large priority for me right now. And in fact, I read a recent article that shared that about 60% of workers surveyed in both the US and Australia were willing to turn down a promotion to protect their own mental health. And I think that's a common trend across a lot of different industries, organizations. And so how can we position ourselves as leaders in organizations to ensure that we are thinking about the human side of things, right? And we're thinking about the mental health of all our employees.
Yeah, I love what you just said, Anthony, thinking about that balance between mental health and making choices, right? On a human level, I became a mom in the pandemic. And so that has certainly shifted and evolved what my needs are and what work-life balance means for me. And so as a people leader, I'm certainly trying to bring that lens, understanding that everyone has experienced changes and has evolved, and really thinking about, how is that going to bring certain questions, to the surface. And I think a lot of organizations, ours included, there's still a lot of uncertainty, definitely some anxiety about what those business decisions are going to mean for their families, on a very human level. And so I'm really excited for today's conversation, just to be thinking about how these business decisions, how these organizational structures are going to impact the people that we serve and their families.
Allison, that's such a good point. And I think about you, I knew you before you had a baby, right? And now you've had a child and you've been remote. And we think about all of our people who've gone through something traumatic over the last 18 months. And they, as a human being, as a worker, as a person, have fundamentally changed. And what they need now looks different. And I think it's so important that as we start to get back to the office, we have to relearn how to work with everybody and not assume that the person we worked with 18 months ago is the exact same person and he'll grind it out. He'll work 12 hours in the office, no problem. That's no longer the case. And so starting every conversation from a place of understanding, of empathy, of it's a new slate, a beginner's mindset, I think is so important, so that we're not, bringing up anything traumatic, we're not stepping on toes, and that we're being really careful, making sure people feel supported in this new skin that they may be wearing.
Yes, definitely. And I Gina, you said, everyone has fundamentally changed. And I want to stress, for me, that looked like I had a baby, I became a working mom, but that's maybe a bit more obvious change, but I think everyone has experienced change. We were talking about this just as we were kind of warming up for today's conversation, and whether it's visible or not visible, or in big ways or small ways, everyone has changed. There's no denying that the last 18 months have certainly impacted everyone on some human cellular level. And so I think as people leaders, it's our responsibility to be open to that conversation. And as Gina said, just seeking to understand how it has changed them, how they are internalizing that, and then going from there.
I love what you all are saying. I want to pull Asia into this discussion as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I didn't want to interrupt because folks were bringing up such great points to all of this. I think for me and also for companies and leaders that I work with, we balance these things. You're hearing my dog in the background, we've had to balance changes in family and responsibilities. And I think it's forced us to reassess what our values are as it relates to life and work. And that also translates for leaders into how they lead their teams and take care of their people and run their companies. And so again, that empathy piece, understanding that folks have experienced trauma in different ways throughout this pandemic, that certainly applied to me in my life. And so everyone has layers. I love what Gina mentioned about folks evolving over the course of experiencing this pandemic in their own way. We have to understand those dynamics as leaders. And for me, I've had to do a lot of reflection. And I think for companies, again, with values and reflecting on that and how to approach this hybrid work environment, what does that even mean? You know, these are things that I've had to think about. And in coaching with ThinkHuman, working with companies through this change management and really reassessing what their values are and how to take care of their people best through all of this growth and challenges.
And I love what you all are saying. I just want to pull in the chat. Everyone is saying agreeing, love it. You're giving some really great insight. Something just resonated with me though, Asia, what you said is just how are you defining hybrid? And I would love to get some insight from you all. How is your organization deciding to define hybrid?
Allison and I have very different company sizes. Allison, I'd love for you to take this one first and maybe I'll share after.
Yeah, and Hakimi, I love that we're even starting with this question because I think one of the challenges that I've experienced in this transition is that it used to be either you were an in-office culture or you maybe had, you know, like a remote culture, and it was kind of a dichotomy. So in pretty simple definitions. Now there are all kinds of different definitions, and I think the challenge of people leaders has also been educating executives who might be making some of these decisions about all of the full spectrum of what this might look like moving forward. So I think it's a great place for us to start. For us personally at Karu, our team is just under 100 people. And before the pandemic, we were in 2 main offices in Los Angeles and Chicago, very much an in-person culture. We really prided ourselves on the relationships that our teams were able to build in person. And so for us, it was very jarring to have to move to a fully remote culture. There was a lot of concern about what are we going to do to preserve these bonds, preserve the kind of traditions and the rituals that were very much at the DNA of our culture. I think we've done, you know, just about as good as anyone can do with that transition. And now as we start to think about what that will look like, we're really thinking about a hybrid format. And hybrid for us might look like having some type of this physical space in some of the main hubs where we have employees and giving them the flexibility to come in and use that space as they need it. We haven't made any final decisions, but it's looking like if there was any type of return, that would most likely be the scenario. We think it's highly unlikely for us that we will recall employees fully into the office, even on any kind of regular cadence.
Yeah, and Susan in the chat just said, can someone talk a bit more about what culture building looks like in a more remote or fully remote working environment? And I think I can give a little bit of insight here. So Centerfield, my company, we've won Best Places to Work in Los Angeles, have built this incredible culture and have dedicated tons of money and time into building a culture that retains our employees, puts the employees first. It's exactly what they want. We do surveys, we make sure we hear from them, and then we implement. And so our culture was built on this collaboration in the office, these happy hours, the free lunches, the snacks, the scavenger hunts, the team bonding events. I can go on for the entire hour about just what we do from a culture perspective, but it was all in the office. And so we didn't have a work from home policy. When we went remote, it was jarring is a really good word. Our CEOs were concerned, how in the heck are we going to keep this culture that we've built and has made our company so successful? How are we going to make that remote? And so luckily for us, I have a couple of employees that are focused on, part of their time is focused on culture. And so we moved as much as we could remote. So we did, as everybody, the remote happy hours and all of that. We also did remote meditation breaks during the middle of the day, in the afternoons, in the morning, so people could log off and do the meditation for free, of course, virtual yoga, all that stuff. We also gave all people leaders a stipend so they could spend money on their teams doing some kind of team bonding. Some leaders spent it on sending their team groceries. Some spent it on creating sweatsuits or pajamas for their teams. The other thing we did was we gave everybody another stipend, and most of this is coming because we weren't traveling, so that travel budget went into culture. We gave them a stipend to create their work from home environment. So everybody got $500, create whatever you need to be comfortable and efficient at home, and that went a really long way. So that was really helpful. And then I think finally, from a people leader perspective, I started hosting these monthly meetings with people managers where we could talk about what struggles are you having? Let's just have an open forum. Let's talk things out. Let's see, you're not alone. Everybody's experiencing this. How can we connect with each other? How can we make sure we're putting our teams first and stretch those empathy muscles? So that's been really helpful. And then finally, the cherry on top, we went a year without doing any leadership programs. And I don't know how many of you in the community work with ThinkHuman today, but we've partnered with ThinkHuman for 3 years. And so we went a year without any programs. And just in the last 4 months, I said enough was enough, and we have to do more programs because our people leaders need it. And so we right now are doing 4 cohorts of people leaders going through leadership programs where they're able to put themselves first. They're able to remember what's important about being a people leader, and they're able to hear creative ways and ideas to keep their teams engaged. And after every session, you know, I inevitably get some feedback from somebody through Slack or a text about, Jeannie, you'll never believe what I learned. I can't wait to talk with you next. And so those leadership programs, I think, have helped energize us to push us through the finish line here. But those are some of the things that we've done that have helped us, I think, kind of stay at the front end of the culture race.
And I mean, I love what everything that Allison and Gina has been sharing regarding the definition of hybrid work. But I think that what is just as important as defining hybrid work is also defining the work itself. And what I mean by that is moving the definition of work away from surveillance, away from visible busyness, and more toward outcomes and trust. And we can build that trust with our employees. In fact, I read an article again on the biggest challenges that organizations and teams have faced in transitioning to a remote work environment is often interpersonal in the form of passive aggressive comments about people's work, about people's behavior. And so if we can focus on redefining what work actually means and clarifying that for everyone, as well as shifting those in-office norms to remote norms, which requires training and patience, and what Gina was talking about, that leadership development, we really are going to set our teams up for success. So we do have to put in like the work and the different steps and all that training to really define it and shift and mold our new world.
Yeah, we have to be intentional. And I see someone said this is our biggest challenge as well for our supervisors and managers. And Asia, I know you mentioned a lot in our pre-call about clarity and alignment. Elaborate on that a little bit more for me.
Yeah, I think even if we weren't presented with this challenge of figuring out what hybrid work is and also how to define or redefine the work that we are doing with our time, clarity and alignment would be essential in order to have the most productive, happy team that you can retain as a leader. And so I think this just brought that even more to the forefront. And there are so many soft skills, or what are considered soft skills for leaders, that truly propel them and their teams to the next level that quite often are pushed to the side, where we have to focus on those things now. We have to effectively manage all of this change. This is not normal. This isn't normal for any of us. And so it's more important now than ever to provide that clarity and alignment, because that's what leads to psychological safety. We focus on that so much. And Gina, thank you so much for bringing up the ThinkHuman programs. It's so important for folks to feel like they're taken care of and on the same page. And psychological safety is what provides that foundation for folks to perform at their best. And that's what we need right now in order to take our companies to the next level, to get over this hump of the pandemic. So yeah.
I think one thing that's coming up for me that I think is coming through in I think how all of us are talking about this or approaching this conversation today is we're all, I think, trying to think about how do we define work moving forward, and less about how do we go back to or somehow try to mold what was pre-pandemic into what we need moving forward. I think organizations and leaders do need to be comfortable shedding some of the things and letting go of what does not serve them anymore. And that might be a lot of things, because the world is so different. People, like we've talked about, their needs are so different. And so I think letting yourself giving yourself permission to let go of things that do not serve you, and being able to start anew and start fresh, as opposed to feeling like you're trying to work yourself within a box. I think it is really helpful.
I totally agree. And I'm trying to find it, but someone here said that performance management should be reevaluated. And it goes to your point, Anthony, about not just evaluating on the task and projects, but we're looking at some of those vital skills that we talked about in our pre-call that's needed.
Yeah, definitely. And the interesting thing about performance management is that professionals in this space are always looking for ways to limit and reduce bias whenever we're measuring performance. And when we're thinking about shifting to a more hybrid work environment, there are biases that are associated with that, right? If you're not present in the workplace, employees often feel like their work is not being visible. They're not feeling like their work is not as appreciated by their manager or by their teams. And so how can we reevaluate and reframe our performance management process to be able to make sure that we're reducing that bias for our managers when they're evaluating their teams and their employees? So it all comes back to that retraining our managers to be aware, and then making sure that they put in mechanisms or processes to make sure that they're treating their employees that are remote as well as the ones that are in on site equally, and making sure that their metrics and all the things that they're measured against are as fair as possible.
So what are some of those? Oh, go ahead, Gina.
Yeah, I was going to say along those same lines, and the tangible pieces that we're looking for in regards to performance management. One thing that my group does is scorecards. And so we implemented these right before the pandemic, and they've actually been extremely helpful in ensuring that our teams are accountable and our people leaders can keep their employees tied to task. It feels a little bit like micromanagement to start. It's essentially, a list for every employee of what the priorities are that they have to do. And you have check-ins every month with your manager on them. So managers are then held accountable to these priorities. We took it a couple steps further. We tied it also to our strategic initiatives. So the employees could see how their day-to-day was now connecting to our bigger picture and our goals that our executive team was working on. And that's a piece of feedback every employee wants is, I'm doing this every day. How does this impact the bigger picture? And so scorecards for us has been hugely helpful in performance management, holding the teams accountable. And once you get over the hump of it feeling a little bit micromanagey, it works really well and the teams love it.
So how do we, address some of the issues that you've experienced as leaders in your organization?
Address some of the issues of what specifically here?
Of hybrid work that may arise.
Yeah, it's a loaded question. I think that to me, the question that I don't know if I have an answer for quite yet, but how do we make those employees who are going to stay remote feel just as important as those who are going to be in the office is top priority to figure out for me and my group at least. Probably 50% of our employees have moved away from an office, so they'll be staying remote. And I think the key for us is we're going to continue to do the virtual engagement sessions that we have so that even if you're not coming into the office for a happy hour, you're still getting to have some kind of collaboration, excitement, and fun from home. Having regular schedules where they can come into the office and increasing our budget for travel, that will definitely help. And I think just putting people at the front of your decision, virtual and in person, every time you make a new decision is the key.
Yeah, and recognizing that each organization is different. I don't think we can give like a blanket statement on how to solve anything. But what I can say is that, as Gina mentioned, being able to listen and gather feedback from your employees through surveys, focus groups, whatever process that you have in place, even those weekly check-ins is really important to be able to be adaptable and adjust to what works for your specific organization. Common things that we're seeing right now from CultureAmp and in different organizations that we're working with is that there's a very high priority for caregiving and caregivers. So what can an organization do regarding that? There's stipends, there's daycare, there's different things that an organization can get creative with, but we have to identify that each organization is different and each process to get to that can also look different as well.
Anthony, I will give the plug to Culture Amp right now. We actually are in the midst of our engagement survey, and we made it a point to include very specific questions this time around what people are going to be looking for and wanting as we start to think about what our format is going to be moving forward. And I think organizations being comfortable and being intentional about asking the questions, and also to Anthony's point, don't ask questions in a blanket statement, right? So we made sure that we wanted to ask, what do people want in terms of team connection? So with the folks that they work with on a day-to-day basis, versus what did they maybe want at a more company-wide level? And that looks very different. We're actually seeing the results are showing us that yes, people do want more frequent connection, in-person connection with their teams, but maybe not so much at the company level, because maybe that brings up different concerns, different questions, whether it's related to travel or additional caregiving needs. So I think that being specific in what you are asking, what kind of feedback you're gathering, and then using those data points to really make informed decisions.
Yeah, I just want to, go ahead, Gina, you got
it.
Please,
Asia, it's all you.
Awesome, thank you. I just wanted to jump in. I'm supporting everything that these folks are saying, and so is my dog. And so I just wanted to chime in and say there might be the possibility that some folks on this call are working for a company where they aren't as open as we are fortunate to have these companies who are on the panel with us today. And so in addition to the survey piece, which is so important, there's also those human conversations, and perhaps you are someone where you have to advocate for yourself or for others. And so communication is certainly key here. And I think in terms of tools, if you're fortunate to work with an organization where they're providing that, that's fantastic. And if you don't have the privilege of working with an organization that does, it's so important to advocate and align with your supervisor. You got to get that ally, find creative ways in order to bump that message up, because it really is about the team's health. And if you present it in such a way where you're reflecting the team's needs, but also the business needs and how it would benefit, at least to consider from a leadership perspective, it's the least that you can do for your team is to consider this. And there's so many different topics that can be brought up in the workplace with change management. I think with hybrid work, I'm not going to say it's a lower level topic, but in terms of controversy, this is one of those things where we can have these discussions. You have to just feel empowered. You can have any discussion, really. But I think with something like hybrid work, even if you're someone who's in an environment where perhaps you don't feel empowered right now to have that conversation, align with your supervisor, find an ally and a coworker, and advocate for yourself and others if you feel like this would be a great move for you or for your organization. So I just wanted to chime in with that, just from a coaching perspective. Yeah.
Asia, the community is loving everything that you said. And on that same note, well, how do you address the divide between what senior leader says or that we should do versus what the talent desires?
I think we need to acknowledge that, the workforce is changing. Retention is important. And if the fact of the matter is, if things don't change, that employees will leave, that's something that organizations have to consider, that they might potentially lose talent. And so I think that's a way to combat that. It's about being strategic about understanding your organization's needs and aligning with the folks who can be your allies. So these could be presented up or out, whatever direction it needs to go in, but presented in a way where folks can understand and have that empathy and potentially collaborate and also compromise in order to find what works best for the organization. Because that's something that's come up. Every organization's different. I think that's why it's so tough to give a concrete answer as to what companies should do, because your company has its own unique energy, flavor. It's all going to depend on your people. So yeah.
Well, one thing I want to touch on here is I think oftentimes folks are approaching this conversation about hybrid work and thinking about it from a loss mentality. So what are we losing by keeping our employees remote or keeping them in a hybrid format, right? So we're starting from a place, we're starting from those hundreds of years of working in an office and assuming that we're going to be losing something. And I think it's been really helpful at times to approach the conversation, just kind of flip that script and remind your executives and your leaders of what we've gained in the last year, right?
Love that.
How much I know for us personally, we started with employees in 3 states. We now have employees in 18 states. So that has obviously opened up a huge, tremendous talent pool, which we wouldn't have otherwise even considered or explored. And so that has certainly added a lot of value. And what value has it added to our employees who are so grateful for the flexibility that they now have and how much gratitude they feel towards the organization. So I think reminding your leaders that there's also so many advantages to being open to other ways of working, and there's a lot for us to consider.
Yes. Supreet says looking for win-win situations always.
Yes.
Gina, do you have anything to add? I see you shaking your head, so something resonates with you over there.
You know, I always have something to add when
Well, go girl.
Amazing. Yes, flipping to a positive perspective. I love that because there is so much negativity that's been around this conversation. And I think as a people leader in particular, it's been really challenging for us because we're naturally empathetic and we're putting people first and there are no answers. And so we're trying to find these answers for our people to keep them happy. And what's been challenging and some of the things I see in the comments is, what if the executive team doesn't see your point of view? Or what if there's some toxicity? What if there's disagreement? And, it's such a good question. And it's so difficult to work through these types of things. And I think that remembering to first and foremost come from a place of being very pragmatic and showing data. Because if a leader is saying that only people who work in the office are working together, and that's all there is to it, then I would challenge him or her, and I would say, why don't you show me what data there is to prove that only people working in the office are the ones who are collaborative? Because there's nothing that supports that. And so I think if you can be strong and take a deep breath before you go into those conversations, making sure you're in a good space, the timing's right, the environment's right, show the data, show why you know your people best. You are in the position you're in for a reason. And I think if all those things are in place, hopefully you have a team that supports you, and that with your data combined, you should be able to kind of get your point across and be able to get what you need for your people. And that's the most important thing at the end of the day. But I'm with you. We are not alone. We've had tough conversations. I have cried way more than I've ever cried in my whole life over the last 18 years. And I think that's okay. It's healthy. We're working on mental health, right?
Right. And Gina, you shared, a specific example with us about how you addressed just a disagreement. And there was some creative conflict in how you grew through that experience. Would you mind sharing that with our community?
Specifically, which example are you referring to? I don't know if I remember that one.
With the leader, I think there was a meeting on how you view hybrid work and how you stood firm on your beliefs, and eventually that shifted their perspective.
Yeah. When we look at these articles that are coming out today, and the Googles of the world are posting, if you're not back in the office by September, then you're not on our payroll or you're taking a pay cut. Very bold statements from big companies. And it's easy to be influenced by that. If you're a leader of a company and you're saying, okay, these guys are doing it, that probably means that we should do it too. And I think there was kind of this quick reaction that maybe we need to get back to the office immediately. And after surveying our population, after working with my team for the last 3 years and knowing my team inside and out, I really know that quickly going back to the office without much notice and preparation and communication is absolutely the wrong approach. And so I took a deep breath and in the right environment, made sure that I shared the survey data again. I talked through why it wouldn't be fair if we quickly moved back into the environment of working in the office, and instead took our time. Let's make sure that the communication is something our employees understand. It's putting them first. And luckily, I have a really great executive team that's able to be flexible with me. And we found a middle ground that works for us and what our teams want. And it was really scary for me to not agree with my executive team on everything, because we're a well-oiled machine typically, and holding your ground can be scary. And so sometimes those feelings seep in, and you just have to trust your gut and know that you're in the position you're in for a reason. You know your people, and you've got to go with it. So luckily, we were able to find a middle ground to meet on.
And thank you so much for your vulnerability in this moment to say, hey, even as a people leader, it was scary for me. And I didn't know what was on the other side, but I took this leap of faith, and thankfully it worked out for the good of your organization.
Yeah.
Allison, did you have something to add?
No, I'm just reading through the chat. There's so many great questions, talking about the generational differences within the office and within your employee demographics. And then also just a question around, there were a couple questions around what kind of behaviors are you rewarding? And I think this goes back to Anthony's, suggestion that, we really need to reevaluate how performance management is structured. And I think certainly there's a lot of training that needs to go into those conversations with management about what are you actually measuring when you're doing performance reviews. But I think one thing that we've also been mindful of is, even in those smaller settings or in those more informal formats where you are celebrating employees, are you celebrating the employees and saying, I want to give a shout out to this person who worked 24/7 through the weekend, and being mindful of what behaviors are you actually rewarding? And it was helpful for us to remind managers that we don't want to celebrate that kind of grind culture, but we want to celebrate the outcomes and the work, right? And that also then opens up who you're celebrating, because there are plenty of people who are having a really, really positive and important impact on projects and work across the company that doesn't require them to sacrifice their mental health, their work-life balance, time with their family. And let's really make sure that we're emphasizing that. So I think that's one thing that can address some of the generational differences, and also the concerns around being physically visible and that kind of busy work.
So how do we ensure, Allison, and to the rest of the panel, that engagement and inclusion of all employees in a hybrid workforce are equitable? What are some of those practical things that we could do?
It's a big question. Such an important question, Hakimi. I know we talked about that in our pre-call. That certainly is something that's so top of mind for me. Anthony, I think you talked about it too. How do we make sure there's not going to be this two-tier structure, whether it's unconscious or unintentional, but we certainly need to be thinking about that. Like I said, I don't know that we necessarily have the solution right now. We don't have plans to come back to an office, but it's certainly something that we want to be proactive about and thoughtful about, so that we can prevent that from happening when the time does come.
I know that we plan to provide the same trainings virtually as we do in office. So for those that are staying remote, they'll have options to do a leader lab with ThinkHuman virtually, just as somebody would in the office. We have, diversity training that our teams will get virtually as well as they can take in the office. So I think it's just really keeping at top of mind that your virtual folks should be offered everything that the in-person group should. And that's the best we can do to try and make it equitable.
Yeah, one interesting kind of anecdote, our leadership group recently got together for a first in-person kind of leadership strategy session. I actually, interestingly, was not able to attend, and I was the only person from the leadership group of about 7 who was not able to attend in person. And actually, I think it was actually a really valuable experience because it forced us as a leadership team to have to experience and live what that experience might be like for our employees. If we were to adopt that type of a format, we had to think about what are the, all of the logistics that goes into it. And then also, how did it impact the conversation? And was I able to be as active and as present in the conversation? Was my voice being heard?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying force your leadership team to do that, to, split up, but I do think that recognizing and calling out when those scenarios do pop up, and then having them put on their empathy hat and think about, okay, how would this affect someone outside of just myself? And for me, I am an advocate. I think this might be controversial, but I am an advocate for, even if you have just one person who is not going to be there with everyone else who's physically in the office, I think having everyone with one screen per person is helpful, just to make sure that that conversation really stays balanced and people are mindful of someone who's not necessarily in the room. But
yeah, similarly, we had an executive offsite in June, and all of our team except for 3 were able to attend. And it was such an interesting dynamic because we had to consciously keep saying, wait, can the phone hear us? Wait, do you have questions? And I think the key that we learned was it's totally doable, but you do need to be conscious about what their experience is, that you're giving them time, you're giving them airtime. And we were able to have a really collaborative session. But I think we also remembered it was our first time back together, and there was probably 2 hours where it was just us giving each other hugs and saying hello and having, some catch-up conversations. And I think that when we go back to the office, we're going to have to allow a little bit of time for all of our employees to have that too. So we have to be patient and know that there may be some unproductive days to start while everybody's seeing each other again. But there are a lot of ahas in that first meeting for us too, Allison.
Yeah, and those unproductive days where people are just feeling warmth and happiness are so productive. I mean, those are really great connections and relationships that are being kind of re-energized. So I think that those are also really important in making space and giving people permission to feel joy and happiness is also really important.
Yeah, I love that, giving people permission to feel joy and happiness. And so Asia and Anthony, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, I'll chime in. I was interacting with folks in the chat. I feel like this is I brought up psychological safety previously, and as far as what that means, because someone asked that question, to simplify it, it's having a work environment where folks feel safe to speak up and take risks without there being repercussions. And so in this environment of not only senior leaders and organizations kind of handling all these changes as well as their employees, this is impacting everyone. And so for leaders, this has required folks to step out of their comfort zone, even with their own skills for their day-to-day jobs. I mean, that's a lot if we're kind of feeling sort of that threat response. And so I'm shaking my head to this as far as allowing the space for joy and to truly enjoy the role or the people that you are with, whether it's in office or you find creative ways for virtual folks to be looped in as well. Where there's a will, there's a way. And there are certainly ways where you can get creative based on what works best with your organization to make sure that perhaps there are multiple opportunities for folks to have their voices heard or for folks to be in the room. What does that room look like? That's something that came up in the chat as well that was really great. That this has forced us to think outside of the box with how we engage with employees. And I think it dials down to not just having a one-size-fits-all approach. We've had to get creative with doing the same thing in different ways to accommodate different people. And that's a level of thoughtfulness that perhaps we haven't been challenged to previously, but we're here now. And I think that's for the greater good for anyone's organization. But that's the only 2 cents I want to put in there. I'm very big on positive energy. And so I just loved what was being said about allowing the space for that to be incorporated into your workday and into your work-life balance. Yeah.
I love what you said about, being creative and thinking outside of the box. And that's one thing that I do enjoy about ThinkHuman is just their ability to think outside of the box when providing some of their services and just connections with, their partners.
Yeah, it's all about customizing. It's something that we've all mentioned previously. Every organization is different, and all the people within your organization are different. That's a lot to think about. That's stressful.
It is a lot.
Yeah, and so I think that's why many organizations are tapping into resources that focus on that leadership development, so that their managers and leaders can effectively help, kind of chug along, the organization. So it isn't on that one person at the top taking care of everyone. It takes the entire team. It's a collaborative effort. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And Anthony talked about that fatigue, right? But giving yourself space to just, if you got to take that dive down a little bit and just exist and be, it's okay as people leaders. Go ahead, Anthony. Elaborate on that a little bit further.
Yeah, no, it's okay as people leaders. It's okay as an individual human being. We're talking about right before we jumped on the call about it's okay to not always be 100% on, 100% there, 100% healthy, and everything is okay, right? So we understand that we're all human and we need to empathize and realize that everyone is going through different circumstances. Everyone's going through different challenges in their life. And what works for me in terms of how do I adapt in terms of that structure, having those structured scheduled breaks throughout my day, being able to spend time with my partner, with my dog, has really helped me to kind of level set and realize and put things into perspective, because there's a lot that's going on right now. And I know that it's difficult to always be 100% motivated to push forward. And I think that that's kind of one of the biggest things that I've taken away from the past 12 to 18 months is that everything's going to be okay. And I do want to kind of call back. I know it was a while ago, but Allison mentioned increased talent pools. And I do want to add one thing to that was there is a diversity lens here that we need to be considering and thinking about. And what Jenna was sharing about the having data to bring to senior leaders, the amount of diversity that we can bring in with hybrid and remote work is incredible. When we think about who is capable and incapable of actually physically coming into work, that increases our talent pool. If we think about how right now unemployment among women has risen about 3% in comparison with men, and that's mostly due to the burden of often being the primary caregiver, we actually increase that by having remote work as an option. So having that diversity and that talent pool, being able to share this data with our senior leaders, we build this stronger argument, a stronger case to have hybrid work for everyone in all organizations, because then we're becoming more inclusive, we're becoming more diverse, we're having that innovative way of thinking because we're having these diverse backgrounds coming together.
Yes.
And so the argument that productivity and creativity is solely on site in location can be easily debunked because of all the diverse thought process that we can bring together.
Look, you getting praise right now, Anthony. I love it. Yes, from Dana, Cheryl, Holly. Absolutely. Yes, Anthony. So with that, we are nearing the close with only 2 minutes left. So I would love to hear your final thoughts, takeaways, words of wisdom that you would like to, share with the community and encourage them and maybe even potentially connect with them in the future as they move forward and build their hybrid workforce.
I would say, just on what Anthony was touching on, to kind of tie that together, some people were commenting, but there's so much pressure. How could I give myself some time in the day? I don't know who you need permission from, and it should be nobody but yourself, but give yourself permission.
Nice, Gina.
Let it go and to take your mental health first and foremost, because that's all that matters. So I would just say, give yourself permission. I've given myself permission, so please give yourself permission.
Yes, permission and grace, Tiffany. Love it.
As people leaders, as HR leaders, I just think it's really important that just remind your executives, hold them accountable to remembering that their business decisions are going to have very real human impacts. And piggybacking off of what Gina just shared, we didn't get to talk a whole lot about this, but make sure that as human beings and as people leaders, you are also setting boundaries for yourself and communicating those boundaries to people around you so that they can support you and hold you accountable and make space for you as well, because you need to take care of yourself so that you can take care of your organization.
Well said, Allison. People are asking for a part two. Go ahead, Asia, Anthony.
To piggyback off of what Allison said, communication is key. And even off of what Gina said and comments in the chat of how do I even step up to have this conversation? There might be someone around you or a direct supervisor. Find anyone that you can communicate with about this.
Yes.
If it's important to you and you don't feel like you're quite there yet, we're encouraging you to give yourself permission to get there, and you absolutely should. And if you feel like you aren't there yet, perhaps there are resources around you. Maybe you're not considering them, but they might be available in order to at least have those conversations. So maybe it isn't just you who's trying to, manage up. And so I wanted to put that in there. Communication is key. And then also for leaders themselves, there's so much responsibility of making sure that the people are being taken care of. And I love what was mentioned about the leaders making sure that they are taking care of themselves and advocating for themselves as well, because that's what's going to be best for their people. So those will be my final words.
Anthony.
Yeah, and I'll keep it short. I would say it's okay to fail. Gina had a perfect example of have the courage to be vulnerable. So we're all human. It's okay to make mistakes.
Take your power back. Thank you all so much. We're so excited and thankful for you and to have your time and to share your time with you. All be blessed. And I hope you enjoy what you heard today. Bye.
Okay. Not even anyway. Not a go giving it.